And now, broadcasting from Titletown, USA, here's Joe Simon.
It is always a great day when we have a subject matter expert joining us. I know I'm a handful, but hey, we're going to make this great today when we talk about annuities. So that's about when I want you to forget what it's called. And now I want you to start to think about what it does. So come along with us. We've got a little journey, and we're going to talk about this multi-billion-dollar movement of money that began about 5 years ago. Annuities, of course, have been around since the Roman centurion days, but all of a sudden they've come to the forefront again, and the cocktail party conversation has changed. Maybe it's changed a little bit from annuities. Did I hear annuities? And a guy comes from across the room and says, I hate annuities. Or maybe it's somebody that says, I just got one of those, and let me tell you, this is what we needed. We're going to talk about the movement of money in record numbers. Let me take a quick look at these numbers before Scott White joins us. In 2020, we saw a record movement of $219 billion. And you'll hear billions thrown a lot because it just continued. 2021, we saw over 250 billion. 2022, over 310 billion. 2023, 385 billion. Let's skip forward to right now. They're projecting 400 billion or more in assets moving into annuities this year, and over 100 billion in just fixed indexed annuities. That's a cat we've got to wrestle with today. So enter in from Manhattan, New York City. Here's our subject matter expert for today, Scott White. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Joe. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk a little bit about this subject matter. I've been talking about annuities for the past almost 20 years now, and you're absolutely right. Within the last 5 years or so, there's been a dramatic shift and a lot of money going into these types of products. And I'm happy to discuss the good, the bad, and the indifferent about these products and shed a little light for your consumers out there.
Yeah, and Scott, let's talk a little bit about the ugly. Let's get right into that. Let's flash back to, let's say 2020, 2007, 2008, 2009. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think fixed indexed annuities were being tossed about. Nobody quite knew what they were. Can we talk just a second about how they've kind of cured themselves over that period of time? Fixed indexed annuities?
No, absolutely. '05 is kind of when they started to get a little bit of traction, but still through 2007, 2008, when there was the financial crisis, not a lot of people were writing them. Now, of course, in '08 and '09, there was a flight to safety, so we saw a lot of fixed annuities being written, but index annuities were still kind of the underdog. They weren't being written as much as they are today. Part of that is because the features of the product weren't as they are today. You would typically see things that had very long surrender periods, right? You'd have durations of 15 years, some 18 years, which is an extremely long time to tie up your money. And they got a bad rap, and I think rightfully so. Today, we see a lot shorter products. We see surrender charge coming down with the interest rate environment where it's at today, which is still pretty high. You have a lot of the best minds in the country, the best financial minds in the country, focusing on annuities, the BlackRocks of the world, the Fidelities of the world, and they've started to pay attention on what these products can do.
Mhm.
So today, the landscape is vastly different.
Yeah, that's funny, Scott, because uh, I think back to '08, and everybody was kind of using their peripheral vision to kind of figure out what's the best thing for our clients. People are hanging on, kind of sweating it out. We've come so far in our risk tolerance over the years. Fixed indexed annuities are one in the portfolio of different types of annuities, but I'm going to sit on that for just a little bit. Right now in real time, dated. So underline the word dated. We're in fall of 2025. If you're viewing this maybe later, but it's fall of 2025. The interest rates from the Fed have just dropped again by a quarter of a basis, 25 basis points. We're hearing from our all-star lineup of insurance carriers that you and I work with together, and they're hinting loudly that their interest rates are going to be dropping. Can we pivot a little bit over to MIGAs, multi-year guaranteed annuities, and what we're going to start to see in that area in today's environment?
I think the short answer is you're going to see some decreases. The 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 fixed rate environment from an annuity standpoint with insurance carriers involves a lot of different things when they set these rates. I think one of the benchmarks is the Fed rate, the 10-year constant maturity rate, but also bond rates. And even prior to the Fed announcement yesterday that they were decreasing rates, we saw some of these corporate bond rates take a dip. And some of the conservative insurance companies out there, the New York Lifes of the world, have dropped their rates. They've dropped their fixed rates. 5 years, right around 4%, which is still pretty attractive from a fixed rate standpoint, especially when you add on the fact that these are tax deferred, right? You don't have the drag of paying taxes on the gain every single year. And what I like to talk about with especially with multi-year guarantees is it's not just compound interest, it's really triple compounding is how it works. And I'll go into that a little bit. Triple compounding is you earn interest on your money, you earn interest on your interest, which everybody knows, but you're also earning interest on money you would have spent on taxes. So the dramatic power of tax deferral can lead to some really high success rates when it comes time to retirement. But the short answer is yes, I think rates will come down. I don't know if we're going to see another Fed rate drop before the end of the year. I would venture a guess is probably not. But I think that ball is already rolling down the hill. I think you're going to see some more rate drops from annuity carriers. Now, that said, we're still at a 15-year high in interest rates. So there's still time for consumers out there to take advantage of where rates are at if they wanted some sort of guarantee. Right now, on a 5-year chassis, you can find a really quality carrier, A plus rated with AM Best, right at around 5% guaranteed for 5 years.
So, Scott, let me jump in there. I had this kind of coffee talk conversation come up late last week. And so we're in October of 2025 right now. And we're talking about things like this. This is a consumer, somebody that's not an advisor and does this every day like you and I. And one of the concerns that I had, and then I kind of brought it up to him as he was sharing this, was so you get a C plus rated insurance carrier, and they have a bonus. I think the bonus he was talking about was somewhere between 12 and 14% on new money, first year new money coming in. And their interest rate was at least a full 1% more than an A rated or better insurance carrier. And I've got some feelings on that, but I want to throw that at you and get your insights when we go even deeper and make comparisons of competitors, not even comparing CD to MIGAs, but annuity to annuity. What are your feelings on what we've been seeing in the insurance environment when it comes to what they're doing with this money that they're sitting on to pay out these kind of interest rates?
It's a great question. And I think it's not unlike the bond conversation, right? If you were to look at a bond from a highly rated company versus a junk bond, typically those junk bonds are going to have higher returns, and it's just risk versus reward. And anytime you see a carrier that is has a lesser credit rating, they're going to need to offer a better rate to attract clients. So C plus is not great, but it's not terrible. Typically, what I like to stay with is B plus plus or higher. And even with B plus plus, it's you have to be careful, right? If you're looking at a product that's going to be around for 30 years, maybe it's an FIA, a fixed index annuity with a rider, or maybe it's a SPIA, something that has a lot of longevity risk. I'd want to stay A or arguably A plus, because the promises that these carriers are making in their contract are only as good as the carrier itself. So for longevity, for products that are going to be around and on the books for a very long time, 30 plus years, I'd stay A plus. If you're looking at a 3-year MIGA, maybe a 5-year MIGA where the money's just going to be there for a short-term parking space for that duration, maybe you could look B plus plus, but it's all part of the equation, right? And I think
Right.
if a client can be comfortable with the rate that an A carrier is giving versus, hey, maybe the B plus plus is offering 10 basis points more. Sometimes that peace of mind is worth the 10 basis points. So it's all
Yeah.
part of the equation on how you select these products for clients and what's really important to them.
Well, and that's just it, the selection, the portfolio, the building, the piece by piece. And, this whole conversation today, we're not talking about we have the silver bullet, take your entire retirement account and move it in to just one annuity because now all your problems will be solved. What I want to do quickly here is let's talk about this thing called laddering. And some of the practitioners on our side of the fence know of this. Actually, a lot of them don't. And so, what do you think of when I say laddering of annuities, Scott? Can you walk into that a little bit?
Of course. So laddering can be a way to hedge interest rate risk. So right now, when we're in a arguably a decreasing rate environment, you don't really have the interest rate risk that you would in an increasing rate environment. But we saw a lot of this in 2010 through 2015, where we had very low interest rates. We had quantitative easing, meaning the government was keeping the Fed rate low to increase borrowing, right, and try to stimulate the economy. So it's called quantitative easing. And during quantitative easing, it's almost like the clock is ticking, right? It's like eventually these rates are going to have to go up to avoid things like inflation. And I think when rates are on the upswing, if you're buying let's say a 5-year MIGA at 3.5% and rates go up in a year, you don't necessarily have the liquidity to repurchase, right? And to kind of ladder out those purchases and hedge that interest rate risk. So in an increasing rate environment, you might argue, hey, let's say you got $1 million, let's put 200,000 into a 2-year. Let's put 200,000 into a 3-year, 200,000 into 4, so on and so forth, because then you'll have more liquid money coming due in 2 years if rates are on the upswing to recapture some of that higher interest rate environment. So I think laddering is a great idea to hedge interest rate risk. Today, it's a little different because if you have the time, meaning you can purchase an annuity and you don't need that asset back for 5 years or 6 years or 10 years, it might be better going with the 10-year because the argument is locking up money at a higher rate for 10 years could be better than, let's say, buying a 5-year, having liquid money in 5 years to repurchase. Those rates in 5 years could be lower. Had you just bought the 10-year, you might be better off. So again, I think in a rising interest rate environment, the laddering can be great. In a decreasing rate environment, you got to really pay attention to when your money is going to be utilized for retirement income and when do you need that liquidity to spend your money, because longer could be better right now. But of course, everybody's situation is different. If you need the money in 5 years, hey, you don't want to go with a 10-year type of commitment. So again, I think it could be a fantastic way to hedge that interest rate risk in a rising environment.
That is a great explanation, Scott. Laddering for everybody listening right now. We can circle back. Every case is different, but definitely something that we have to think about. And what I think of is I came across a term, and maybe I'm the late guy to the party here, but it was only just maybe a couple of weeks ago. I was reading an article on annuities and how people are using them, and laddering was part of it. And we're talking about the 60-20-20 model portfolio, which maybe we can spend a little time talking about today. But this phrase that came out was moneyness, and a migration of people that have variable annuities. And we're not going to talk a lot about variable annuities, but the idea behind it was that Americans have a moneyness about their money, and that is even when there's still a surrender charge that decreases over the years, and they know they're going to pay that before they can pull their money out. They want to do that because they have this moneyness, this impatience about getting at their money and doing something differently about that. Scott, are you seeing that in other cases you're working on around the country, or what are your thoughts on this moneyness thought when it comes to annuities?
I'm seeing it in terms of trying to get into a better situation. And most of the time, what I see is it happens with VAs or variable annuities, but I'm seeing it more on old FIAs where, let's say, something was purchased in 2018, right, or 2019 when rates were lower than what they are today. And maybe we'll have time to talk about caps and par rates and what those actually mean. But in short, a cap is, hey, the most money you can earn in a given year on an FIA. And maybe those caps during that time were, let's say, 5%. And today they're 10% or 9.5%. So they're a lot more attractive. You have a lot more upside potential in today's FIA than you did in 2018, 2019 because of where interest rates are. And even though some of these older FIAs might have a 3% surrender or even a 5% surrender charge, clients view it as, hey, it might be worth it taking that hit and taking a loss a little bit in order to get into something that's going to give me more upside potential and a higher rate. And what I would argue is, hey, maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. And there are some specialty products that will give you an enticement called a bonus, and some are as high as 16%. And what we typically see is the higher that bonus is, the lower the cap happens to be. So maybe you go somewhere in the middle and you go with a 5% bonus just to cover the loss. And in exchange, your cap might be 8% instead of 10. So your cap is still a lot higher than what you purchased in 2018, 2019 at 5%. You've just increased your upside potential by about 3%. So these are the types of conversations we've been having for the last 2 years with a lot of clients out there. And the phrase that I really like to coin is you got to refinance your annuity. And what I mean by that is, if you look at a typical mortgage, right, you refinance your mortgage when rates are low. You have to look to refinance your annuity when rates are high. And that conversation starts with, hey, what do I currently have? What's great about it? What's not so great about it? And if we can take a lateral move and not lose any money and make up some of that loss with a bonus and give you better upside potential, there's a lot of clients have been taking advantage of that, which has led to the numbers that you're talking about today with the influx of money into FIAs in particular.
And that's another great explanation, Scott. It feeds right back into what we were just talking about earlier in laddering. When you have different movements like that, and you're concerned that maybe you can expand that participation rate, and if you had it all tied up in one annuity versus maybe that's just a 20% of what you have in only one annuity, the chances of spreading that and winning with larger numbers might become better. But let's go deeper in a minute. Let's get a little granular for people listening. You may love or hate this, but I think we have to address it. People talk about, well, I heard annuities are a ripoff because of the fees, number one, and some people now in this 5-year run of fixed indexed annuity growth. It really bothers me that I don't think a lot of people understand what par rates and cap rates are. So can we address that?
Absolutely. I'm gonna take a phrase from my father-in-law and say that they are operating on OI, which old information. The information that was around in 2007, 2008, when you had some really high surrender charges, and you had some variable annuities that had a lot of fees as well. When you talk about specifically variable annuities, they have fees like something called M&E, which stands for mortality and expense. There's funds fees, right? Depending on how you're allocated, there can be fees for the funds that you're in. There's admin fees. There might be rider fees if you have an income rider or a liquidity rider or a death benefit rider. The list goes on and on. And sometimes you can see these fees go up 4% plus per year, which creates this tremendous fee drag on your gain. If you're earning 10%, hey, maybe that's really 6 after all said and done with the fees that are tied to this. So you do see these fees on VAs. You can strip all that stuff out as a consumer, and you can make these fees a lot less than what I just mentioned. In the 1-2% range. But when you flip the script and you talk about FIAs, typically you don't see any fees. There's no M&E, there's no funds fees, there's no asset management fee. The only fee that you will see is maybe an income rider fee. If you add something, some sort of guaranteed income rider, typically those are around 1%. But if you're just looking for safe, steady growth with downside protection, and you're trying to beat the fixed rate environment, I think realistically the goal for an FIA is anywhere between 6 and 8.5%. If you can yield that over time, these things are doing their job. So 6 to 8.5% upside potential realistically with tax deferral, with no fees, and with no downside risk, I think creates a really nice package for a lot of clients out there. And as a result, we're seeing clients use these types of products as almost like a fixed income alternative, where they're moving some of their money from, maybe US fixed income into these FIAs because of the higher upside potential that they pose. And when you model out a portfolio and you include these FIAs in the mix, you'll see a lot of these financial metrics jump. Technical things like Sharpe ratio get better, Sortino ratio get better, yield, obviously, which is the most important one, gets better. So they can do a lot of things when you look at the portfolio from a bird's eye view.
So maybe to sum this up, if I'm someone, I've got $1 million retirement account, I want to take half of that and put it into something like we're talking about today. It's specifically a fixed indexed annuity. So we roll that in. It's a tax deferred roll in, no taxes on that. We cross this tax deferred bridge into a fixed index annuity. And the stock market, I picked an index that mirrors the S&P 500. The S&P 500 ends its year at 25% up. However, my fixed indexed annuity doesn't show that. And I'm
Right.
wondering why I didn't get a 25% return on that one index option that I chose. Can you talk about how that applies to par or cap?
I can. So the example I always like to use is a 10% cap, because that's a really attractive cap. Those do exist today with some of the more competitive FIAs in the marketplace on the S&P 500. And you really have to take your consumer through 3 years of how these products work in order to give them a really good understanding for, hey, how does my money grow when the market's up? How is my money protected when the market's down? And how does my money respond when the market corrects itself after a downturn? And so let's run with $100,000 just to keep the math easy, right? So what these products do with a 10% cap and a $100,000 deposit is they track the S&P when you buy the policy. So let's say you buy the policy, and again, for sake of numbers, let's say the S&P closes that year, or that day rather, at 1,000. And over the course of the year, the market's doing this and it's going up and down. And at policy anniversary, it closes at 1,100. So that's up 10%. We get everything up to our cap, which is in this case 10%. So our 100,000 will become 110. The following year, let's say that 1,100, market's going up and down, drops down to 900. So that's a negative 200 point movement, which is negative 18%. Those years where the market is down, you just earn a zero for the year, and you still have 110,000 in your account. What happens year 3 is really where I feel an index annuity shines, because the account's still at 110. You're going to start at a lower value at 900. And if the market rebounds back up to 1,000, which is slightly over 10%, you're going to earn whatever your cap is. So in our example, 10%. So now there's 120 and change in there with compound interest. So you can actually make money on volatility. Now, back to your original question. Let's say that year 1, the market wasn't up 10%. Let's say it's up 25. A lot of clients think, hey, the insurance company is pocketing 15%, which is not the case. The insurance company is making money on the underlying bond portfolio that they've purchased to back this policy. That underlying bond portfolio is how they are able to guarantee that your consumer doesn't lose any money if the market's like this for 10, 15 years. You can't lose any money in these. So they have to have this bond portfolio that backs up the minimum guarantee. The person that's earning that 15% is probably the investment banker that purchased uh, the option on the S&P to figure out what the cap is. So insurance company is earning money on the bonds. The consumer is earning money on the benchmark of the S&P in this example, and then you have the investment banker who's purchasing the options. That's winning in that scenario that you just gave me. So it can look negative if you just go through the first year, right? Up 25%, I only get 10. That sounds like a raw deal. But if you take them through year two, where the money's protected in a 2008, when the market's down 35, 40%, or during COVID when the market's down, your money is protected. And then how does that index annuity respond, or how does my money grow when the market is corrected? And over the course of time, 10, 15, 20 years, like I said, upside potential 6 to 8.5%, because you have that protection and you have that cap on the upside. A general rule of thumb, if you
Yeah.
look at the history of the S&P, and this only works on the S&P, is take your cap, whatever the cap is on the S&P 500, take 70% of that, and based on historic numbers, that should be the yield that you're getting over time. So on a 10% cap, you should expect around 7, within a few basis points. Now, of course, past performance is not a guarantee of future results. We know that, but that's how history has worked.
And what I like to say is this is where zero is a hero. Everybody likes to talk about what the market's going to do and how fat it's going to get and how far north it's going. But what we don't like to talk about, and most of us have lived through this once or twice in our lifetime now, is when it goes negative. And Scott addressed that. And so the bleeding is stopped at zero in this type of insurance product. Scott used the term policy before. An annuity is an insurance policy. It is not a mutual fund, a stock, or a bond. And so it's not fair to try to put those two horses together and race them, because it's not going to give you the same results. And that's a mindset change. What I want to pivot to in the last couple of minutes that we have here, Scott, is let's talk about a recent case where we were able to work together on really achieving a great thing for a client. I'll sort of lay it out, and then you can talk a little more about some of the things that we both feel were the things that an aha moment that light went on for this particular client. What makes things interesting is this is an individual that has been a PhD in research, and leads that particular school at a major university here in the United States for over 30 years. She had a old 403b, meaning she could no longer contribute to that. She has another one with about equal amount of money, but this old one was kind of over there and not forgotten, but the services just weren't what she was accustomed to. And it was a large sum of money. It was close to $1 million that we're talking about here, and her lifetime retirement savings, half of it. And just in going through this process of different things that we were talking to her about, one of the things that I heard towards the end of the conversation in the beginning was, I just wish we had a pension. I just wish we had something that I could say I have this amount of money, and if I live after I retire for another 25 years, another 30 years, I kind of know year in and year out what I'm going to get regardless of what the market does. And that's really where I said, you know what, we need another call. I need to get with Scott. I think we might have something you would be interested in. And so that's the case. This is a person that is 60, 61 years old. She's a widow. Financially, she's doing quite well. But she's kind of in that red zone, think football terms. She's 20 yards away from the goal line now. And so it's time to start thinking about decisions on how long she wants to continue to do what she's doing, and uh, what kind of path could she create for her retirement income. So Scott, I'll toss it over to you, and maybe you can pick up on a little bit of the thought that we took in planning this case out.
No, absolutely. I remember this case well. And she's not dissimilar to a lot of pre-retirees. And I think when we're looking at financial planning and being financially responsible and planning for our retirement, Even the sayings that we have growing up is, hey, a penny saved is a penny earned. It's all accumulation based, right? When we look at how we think about money and how we think about asset allocation, is saving money, yield, growing our assets, diversification, which by all means is super important. But when you enter the twilight of your working years and you start to think about, okay, my paycheck's going to stop, right? And I kind of look at a paycheck as a bond. You get this monthly or biweekly paycheck, and that's going to go away. And when you start thinking about the decumulation phases, how do I make this retirement nest egg last for as long as I'm going to live? Because that's a moving target, right? No one knows when they're going to go. What types of challenges do I have? And so if I've saved up $1 million for my retirement, and let's just say I'm taking 4% every year, which is kind of the old adage, right? We hear this thing called the 4% safe money withdrawal rate, which uh, oversimplified is basically I have $1 million, I can withdraw 40 grand the first year, keep the rest allocated in my portfolio, and based on something called a Monte Carlo analysis, uh, that should last, right? That should last through retirement age. And the key word there is should, because you have things like sequence of return risk, which I'll go into a little bit of detail. You have things like rising healthcare costs, rising rents, a number of things, low interest rates historically, maybe not today, but you could have low interest rates in the future. And all of these things can make a big impact on your retirement income. And specifically with that uh, sequence of return risk, it's really dramatic. If you could average the same rate over 15 years, and depending on what the sequence of those returns are each year, it could be the same yield, but that sequence could dramatically affect how long your retirement nest egg is alive. And so I think annuities is the only product out there that can guarantee income on a monthly basis or an annual basis or a quarterly basis, however you want to take it. It's the only product that can pay you an income stream guaranteed for as long as you live. Everything else out there, fixed income, bonds, mutual funds, any real estate, they only pay you your interest earned and your principal. And once you're out of money, that income stream stops. So with this particular case, we were able to show her an FIA with an income rider, and this income rider had this built-in feature where it had potential increases in retirement. She's relatively young for a retiree. So we wanted to figure out a way to give her, I call it a personalized defined benefit plan, where she could make a deposit. The deposit's not annuitized, it's still earning money linked to several indices, but it would pay her a monthly income that she could not outlive with the guarantee that it would last for as long as she would. So that shift in mindset, I think, is the first hurdle for most clients. Is I'm not in the yield game anymore, right? And I like to
Right.
say you're not thinking of ROI, or you got to shift your thinking from ROI standing for return on investment and start thinking of it as reliability of income, because that's what's important. So
100%. Yeah, and I think that's I want to underline that again, the mindset change that you work in this so closely and you're doing this, but you were the one that used that phrase as we were walking through this together in preparation to talking to our clients, that it just made sense, and that is it's not about accumulation, it's about the payout.
no, absolutely. And when you look at, because if you're just looking at this product in a vacuum, that's what people tend to do. And if you can back up and see what this product does with that guarantee income and what it can do for the rest of the portfolio, you could get more aggressive if you want to try to achieve yield somewhere else in the portfolio, because you have this guarantee, you have this income floor. Or maybe you could even get more liquid in the rest of the portfolio because you have this guarantee. The annuity makes your portfolio way more efficient when it comes to income generation because it's guaranteed and you can't outlive it. So some of the things that you can do with the remaining assets are really, really interesting.
Scott, we are running out of time today, and I need to kind of bring the ship into harbor here. It's been a wonderful conversation. Every case, I say this often, and as much as I can, every case is different. You can't have a case that looks just like what we talked about, but maybe there are some ingredients that came up in there that spark something in your mind that you said, well, I didn't realize that. I didn't know I could have my own personalized defined benefit plan. That sounds really interesting to me. Why am I not hearing about that? There's so many things we couldn't get to today. I want to thank Scott White, our subject matter expert today, but I want to go right to my final thoughts for today as we come up against time. And so, number one, what we learned today is does it really matter what it's called? Rather, it matters what it does. I guess that's a question mark to you that only you know the answer to, but I think we kind of solved that one today and gave you the answer to that one. Number 2 of 3 is the walk away for today is moneyness. The moneyness that Americans have. Can we work through this moneyness issue if we know, for example, what the surrender charges are, maybe deploying laddering of annuities in some cases to kind of help offset that feeling of wanting to get at your money a little longer. But remember, it's all about the risk and reward and the discipline behind that. And then finally today, CDs versus MIGAs. We never got to talking about QLACs. So that's my bonus for you viewers today is if you want to know more about QLACs, I know Scott and I have some material that we can share with you when it runs up against RMDs. Your IRAs are going to be sending you notices saying there's a little bit of money you need to pull out, pay some taxes on it because of your age. And there's a thing called a QLAC that we can deploy starting at age 65 up to age 85. We just ran out of time to talk about that one today, but that could be a personalized conversation if you're somebody in that age zone of 65 to 85. So those are the walkaways. Those are the final thoughts for today. And what I want to say, as always, have a prosperous day.
You've been listening to the Joe Simon Podcast. Big ideas with powerful stories and real-time solutions. Business succession planning, executive benefits, employee benefits, tax beneficial savings, and more. Remember, information discussed here today is dated and not specific to your situation. Always seek personal counsel from qualified advisors. Joe Simon is a licensed insurance agent in the state of Wisconsin. Licensed to advise on accident and health, life insurance, disability insurance, and annuities, as well as qualified long-term care insurance.